Chrissie is hilarious.
Chrissie, have you ever heard of the comedian Basha K. Ali?
No, that sounds like something you yell out before you blow up a plane.
Basha K. Ali!
30 seconds remaining.
But you know what good thing to say? I dabbled in stand-up or something. I haven't been disrespectful to you at all.
I was very confused by the title, Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that's also what we call it when Ash takes off his shirt. I shouldn't be up here. I should be in school on the other side of the ocean. Welcome, and good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. Please like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube right now. And you can listen to this podcast, gosh darn it, everywhere. Facebook, Rumble, Rockfin, YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, all of the places. So please like and subscribe. Hello to everybody in the chat. Before I bring on our fabulous guest, I have some comedy shows to promote. Woohoo! Going back on tour. Just a few shows. If you don't come, you're probably gay. This is my this is my banner. March 29th, I'll be in Fort Wayne, Indiana at the Fort Wayne Comedy Club. I believe there will be 2 shows that night. It's a Saturday. I think there's a 7:30 and a 9th. No, I don't want to update my software right now or ever. iPhone. Yes, March 29th. I think it's a 7:30 and a 9:30 show. FortWayneComedyClub.com for tickets. And then I'll be with Jimmy Dore in Hartford, Connecticut, April 1st. May 17th in Mount Kisco, New York. I'll be back at Jazz on Main. It's a cute little jazz venue that I did over the summer. Then August 8th and 9th, back to Strong Island, New York, my homeland. I think the Brokerage is the club I'll be at. And then October 18th, I'll be in Massillon / Canton, Ohio at Crackpots Comedy Club. Those tickets will be on sale shortly. I know you can buy Indiana and Mount Kisco. I can buy those tickets right now. So yes, I'll see you guys. So fun. Yes, back on the road again. Our guest today, oh my gosh, she has a wonderful YouTube page. Please subscribe. It's at Real Rachel Parker. She is an independent Canadian journalist covering the Alberta statehood movement, which I'm totally fascinated by because I'm trying to learn more and more about Canada. They're more than just hockey, okay, and maple syrup. And she's going to tell us all about it. Welcome to the show, Rachel Parker. Hello, Rachel.
Hello. Happy to be here.
She's in the mountains. You can see behind her the lovely view. I love your background because when my sister-in-law was pregnant, she had me come up to her house in North Carolina, and she's like, "Can you just paint a mountainscape?" And it looked just like that. And I went to all this trouble painting this mountainscape for the nursery, and then she just threw wallpaper over it like the next year, like 2 years later. And I was like, well, that's the last time I'm doing that. She probably won't watch this.
Burn. Oh, you should clip this and send it to her so she knows.
Look, I know you don't watch any of my stuff, but I do have feelings about that. Hello, Rachel. It's good to see you here. You are Canadian. Tell us about, I'm saying that like it's a bad thing. No, it's a great thing. Tell us a little bit about how you came to become a journalist, number one, and how you started covering the Alberta statehood movement.
Yeah, great question. So I am initially hail from Ontario, Canada. I'm actually from the Niagara region. So I grew up about 20 minutes from the Canada-US border, crossing into Buffalo, New York. And when the Canadian dollar was better, before Justin Trudeau demolished our economy and the value of the Canadian dollar, I would actually, with my mom, we would just do our shopping in the States because it was so much cheaper because
Oh,
the
wow.
cost of your goods there are quite a bit more affordable and our dollars used to be a little bit more on par with each other. And so it was like a regular weekly occurrence that we would drive across the border, we would hit up the Walmart, buy some groceries, we'd get gas, maybe if we had time we'd hit up one of the outlet malls. Things have flipped so drastically that now it's actually the reverse, in which they built an outlet mall in the Niagara region so that all the Americans can come shop in Canada because your dollar gets you so much further in Canada. So just a funny little tidbit for you, but I'm very familiar with America. We always vacationed in the States, and my family generally, loved America. Everyone in my family wanted to be American, which is sort of a popular theme in that part of Canada because of how close it is. And there's some really conservative roots that run in that part of the country. As an adult, I was always, a young adult, I should say, very interested in politics, very interested in writing, didn't really want to know what I do with my life. Eventually, I was like, well, I like to write and I tend to write about politics, so I'm going to study political journalism. I moved 5 hours northeast to Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada, to study journalism at Carleton University, which was a radically left-wing university, the type that you hear about. I was pretty unprepared for that. I don't think I was aware how sheltered I was growing up in a very conservative and Christian community. And I also don't think I was aware how opposed to the rest of the world my views were and how unpopular conservative values were going to be treated even in a university setting. And so that was a very difficult and shocking experience for me, and I really did not enjoy my university experience. I wanted to drop out, but I had this dream of being a political reporter, and I just thought to myself, if I can make it through these 4 years, then I think I have a real fighting chance at doing this. Now,
What did you major in?
I majored in journalism and
Okay.
political science. And so basically, I had kind of noticed, the themes of a biased mainstream press were already very prominent in Canada and the States.
Oh.
And I
So
think
what year was this? What year did you graduate college?
2019.
2019. Oh, so you fresh out. You just a babe in the woods. Okay, so you
Well,
were
that was
fully
almost like 6 years ago now.
Yeah, you were okay. I'm an old person, so I consider everybody younger than me to be a baby. But I say that to explain, like, you were in college, kind of at the peak, in peak woke years.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a really horrible environment. But I made it through. I made it through. I made it through without being indoctrinated. I will say I came out less conservative than I went in, but that quickly shifted. And so, people kind of lose themselves in that young adult period of their life. And then as they get older, they refine themselves, I would say, or, realize that their parents did things for a reason and often did things the right way, especially when you come from a very strong conservative upbringing. So I kind of noticed, I was like, there's not really a lot of conservative voices in the Canadian press. It's a bit different in the States. You have things like Fox News, you have things, even out of Fox News, so many people have gone independent. You got Megyn Kelly, you got Tucker Carlson. Obviously, that's more recent. But we didn't really have it in Canada. There was like a small startup that had tried to be essentially conservative voices in the press that died very, very quickly. So I had this, brave notion that I would go and I would be a sort of conservative voice in the press. I actually don't believe in what we like to call nonpartisan journalism. I believe that all publications have an ideology that they want their reporters to support and to follow. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's best to just be transparent with your audience, that you're not biased and that you do have a certain political leaning that you tend to. And so I had this notion that I would go and I would study journalism and be a right-wing voice. And I did have some success in that. Upon graduating, I had an internship, a very prestigious internship at the Globe and Mail, which is sort of Canada's newspaper of record, essentially akin to your New York Times. Then I went and worked for a smaller publication called iPolitics. And it was sort of there that everything fell apart for me because, as I mentioned before, I graduated in 2019. Well, what happened just a few months later in March 2020? The COVID-19 pandemic. And so all of a sudden I was in this situation where, I was like what's happening is wrong. And our office was shut down. Like Canada was totally on lockdown for like a good 2 years. I know that the rules and regulations varied from state to state, but in Canada, it was essentially like vaccine passports. You were on lockdown. You weren't allowed to go anywhere. You weren't allowed to have your family over for Christmas. That was generally what happened across the entire country. So I moved back home to Ontario. I was living with my mom. I was this like fresh college graduate who was watching what I thought would be some of the best years of my life essentially disintegrate before my eyes because of government policy. And I was very angry and frustrated. And the people that I was friends with and that the people who were in my community were all angry and frustrated. And so I was in this position where I was wanting to write pieces that were critical of the government narrative on COVID-19, which was changing basically every other day. By the way, you might remember one of the big things early on was you don't need to wear masks. You don't need to wear masks. And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, you're not allowed to come into the grocery store without a mask on. You need to put masks on your babies when you go out in public. Just that type of constantly changing sanity. Then there was the COVID-19 vaccines. We were told, it was not going to be mandatory to take them. That shifted very quickly. All of a sudden, it became mandatory for everyone to take, was essentially an experimental drug. And so I was wanting to write pieces about this. One of the areas I focused on was the travel restrictions. I don't know if you guys had anything like this. I know in California, they were recommending that people quarantine for 2 weeks upon returning to the state after traveling. So in Canada, this was actually mandated that if you returned from travel from abroad, you had to quarantine in your home for 2 weeks. And if you broke that quarantine, if you even stepped outside for air, you could risk being charged $750,000 or up to up to 6 months in prison.
How would they know that you were?
They were sending quarantine officers that they hired to go around and visit people's houses, and what these quarantine officers would do, and I know this because I was frequently traveling at the time to the States to get away from the restrictions, is that I would be sitting in my house and you would see a car parked. I had a window in my mom's house that faced the street.
Just lurking.
And there was a car that would be parked there for about an hour just watching the house to see who was coming and going. And then, before they left, they'd come to the door, they'd knock on the door, they'd ask to see you, they'd ask to see your license so that they could verify that it was you, and they'd go on to the next house. And by the way, while this was happening, there was a woman in Oakville, Ontario, not far from where I grew up, who was actually sexually assaulted in her home by one of these quarantine officers.
Do you feel like you were targeted because they knew you were traveling, or do you just feel like everyone got this treatment?
Everybody who was traveling outside of the country was essentially given this treatment. This program didn't come into place right away, but once, the government felt like they really wanted to crack down, they wanted to create fear so that they could really capitalize on the pandemic in the federal election. And they wanted to have this big show of force. And, they were spending millions of taxpayers' dollars on this program. The situation was actually somewhat worse if you flew into the country versus crossing at a land border. If you flew back into Canada after traveling internationally, you were forced to quarantine at one of these government approved hotels, and you would essentially have to stay there for like 2 weeks. It was an insane amount of money. I remember hearing some friends who had to do it, just the cost that they would have to pay to stay there. And again, there was instances of like people being sexually assaulted at these hotels.
That's horrible. So all this costs fell on the person that had to be quarantining, yet they use your tax dollars for all this other stuff. That's so ridiculous, so controlling. Yeah, I think Canada had it way worse than we did in America. Very scary.
Undoubtedly, Canada had, one of all the developed nations, all the Western countries, I think Canada and Australia had some of the worst COVID policies. And so, I was a very young person at the time, and I was like, what's going on is really, really wrong. And I was wanting to write pieces that were critical. And I remember my boss saying to me at the time, you're like the only person who's writing these pieces. We had a very pathetic federal conservative party in government at the time. They weren't even really pushing the government on the breach and the restrictions placed on Canadians' freedoms at the time. They were actually saying more vaccines and more restrictions. And so basically my boss was saying to me, there's nobody in the country who feels this way. These are not legitimate concerns for you to have, because even in Canada's House of Commons, none of the parties are raising the concerns that you're raising here. And I knew she was wrong. And so I continued to push the issue, and it created a lot of friction at my workplace. Often well after the 5 o'clock typical day would have ended, I was haggling with my editor and my copy editor about stories and about specific wording that we would use to discuss issues. And so it was a very difficult relationship on all sides. And I have to say that I actually, on a personal basis, really liked the people that I worked with. with, but I can be quite a confrontational person. And so, I use that to my advantage. I was not just going to simply roll over and take what they told me to take because I knew that something was amiss. And I was obviously proven correct in that
Wow.
when the Freedom Convoy happened in 2022 and
Right, with the
truckers
truckers,
from
yeah.
all over the country drove up to Ottawa to protest government mandates.
That's good for you for being so strong in your convictions at such a like relatively young age. I feel like it takes people a while to kind of come into their own and feel comfortable in their own skin, just like as young adults. But and that's very cool that you worked at at a news outlet and you knew, no, I'm feeling differently. Other people probably feel the way I do. Just because we're not seeing this reflected in the mainstream news doesn't mean that this is on the minds of the people. So that's very commendable, Rachel, that you knew to just stick to your guns there. So how did you start? And I'm going to transition this to the Alberta statehood movement because I'm going to pull up this article because it's just so interesting. I was comparing it to I was talking about this with my husband. It's almost like I live in New York, which is a very blue liberal state, but in Westchester County, which is kind of more I feel like I'm in a red part of what there are probably parts that are blue, but similar to like Long Island, where I'm from in New York, is very red. There are parts of New York that are red, but overall it's a blue state. So I was like, oh, I wonder if Alberta is kind of that way. Like it's just everyone seems, it's like maybe a conservative stronghold in Canada. Canadians are fed up, says Alberta lawyer leading delegation to Washington for statehood talks. Now this is Jeffrey Rath. He is a lawyer from Alberta. And you actually interviewed him. Tell me a little bit about what you learned from your conversation with him.
Yeah, so just to sort of flash back, obviously, since my time in Ontario, I've moved to Alberta. I've covered the Alberta provincial government pretty closely here, as well as I still dabble in federal politics. And on Monday, there was an event hosted in Alberta called Injection of Truth. That is essentially a bunch of doctors who oppose the government narrative on COVID-19 and certainly the COVID-19 vaccine. They gather to warn about some of the damages caused by the vaccine, things like vaccine injuries, and they say this is what we can do moving forward to help people. The theme of this week's was healing humanity, and essentially talked about what people who have been vaccine injured can do and how the government should offer compensation for some of these individuals. Anyways, so sort of like if you kind of run in conservative politics in Alberta, you run into a lot of the same people at these types of events. It's a ton of fun going and just seeing everybody. And so Jeffrey Rath was there. I've interviewed him a couple times for various projects that he's worked on. He's known as a freedom lawyer. So there's still like courts in Canada are still backlogged with COVID-19 cases of people who felt that their civil liberties were overstepped by the government and are essentially suing to have some compensation. And so that's still a very active thing that's ongoing in Canada. And Jeffrey Rath is one of the lawyers who works on a number of big class action lawsuits. So I've interviewed him a number of times before on my show and things like that. And so we were just catching up and he mentioned to me, and obviously I've noticed that the statehood issue has been kind of bubbling up online. And I had no idea the traction it would get, but he mentioned to me that he was organizing this delegation to go down to Washington, D.C. and talk to the Trump administration about Alberta statehood. And I said, that's really interesting. And I've noticed that there's, a lot of interest in that online. Let's do a quick interview. And he agreed. And so we did the interview and he basically just explained that we're fed up of the idiots in Ottawa running the show because our federal government has so much more power here in Canada than it does in the States. In the States, I feel like a lot of your government decisions are left up to your state legislatures and your governor. Not really the same here. The federal government is consistently vetoing stuff done by provinces, even to the point that they've passed legislation that essentially prevents provinces from certain infrastructure until it's approved by the federal government. So it's just a really big hot mess down here. And Albertans, like Jeff Rath, are tired of it. And so we did the interview, we posted it online, and it was like, it just totally blew up. I mean, I think you saw well over 6 million impressions.
Wow.
Obviously, it got picked up by a bunch of outlets in the States. And it's just kind of taken off from there. And this delegation, I think, was really like impressed and encouraged by the response that they received and just the number of phone calls they've received of Albertans asking how they can get involved. And my understanding of it is that they're still planning on going down to DC within the next 3 to 4 weeks. I believe things are moving pretty quickly here. It's my understanding that they're going to be hosting a press conference in the next couple of days to sort of announce their next steps. So this issue is not going away anytime soon.
Wow, that's really interesting. Let me pull up this article a little bit just to explain to folks. A Canadian lawyer leading efforts to explore the possibility of Alberta joining the U.S. As Trump continues to push for closer ties with Canada's energy-rich province. Does Alberta have the most oil or gas of anywhere in Canada, or it just has?
Of anywhere in Canada, and we have the
Wow.
third largest oil reserves in the entire world.
Oh my gosh. That's fascinating. Okay, there's literally hundreds of Albertans that are reaching out and volunteering to join our delegation, says Jeffrey. Rath and a small group of Albertans are going to travel to DC to discuss potential pathways for Alberta, including independence with economic ties to the U.S. Territorial status or full statehood. And it's crazy that this could be a real possibility. I think a lot of us like to just have mostly been joking around that Canada could become a state just because Trump sort of like has a joking manner sometimes. Sometimes you don't know if he's being serious or not, or it's something he's saying to make a deal. But we welcome you guys. He believes the movement will gain traction as dissatisfaction with Canada's federal leadership grows. It's steering a committee of people that are looking to come to Washington on an exploratory basis to meet with a representative appointed by Trump to explore the benefits of either Alberta becoming an independent sovereign nation with economic union to the U.S., becoming a U.S. territory, or pursuing full statehood. Rath argues that Alberta, home to 4.9 million people and a major hub for oil, manufacturing, and construction, has little in common with Canada's political elite. I think a lot of us here in the U.S. can identify with that for sure. Those of us living in red states, especially the last 4 years, they've completely lost their way, he said, criticizing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's administration. Trudeau and Carney, are wringing their hands over tariffs. They're going to be kicking Albertans in the teeth and bringing in a 21% carbon tax in April. Rath claims that Albertans feel alienated from Ottawa's policies and share more cultural and economic ties with Montana than with the rest of Canada. Yeah, those are probably your neighbors. People in Alberta are fed up with being governed by idiotic politicians back in Ontario that do not understand our province and do not understand that culturally we're far more closely affiliated with our friends to the south in Montana than we are of all the people in Ottawa. Canadian leaders have rejected the notion of Alberta leaving the country. Trudeau reaffirmed Canada's sovereignty, telling reporters there is not a snowball's chance in hell that Canada will ever be the 51st state. Rath, however, believes Alberta should have the right to choose its own future. He and other local leaders are drafting a proposal to present to Trump's administration, urging the U.S. to support Alberta's push for self-determination. Please support Alberta's self-determination. Promise that to Alberta in the same way you promised it to Greenland. We'll be an excellent partner to the U.S. and we'll all prosper, Rath said. Whoa. What would be the process for... Is it a complicated process for Alberta to, either become its own state or to join the U.S.? Like, what would it take? Oops. Okay, my fingers are jacked up. Okay, yeah, Rachel, what would the process be like? Would this be several, I guess, elections or?
It wouldn't actually be quite so complicated. It would simply go to a provincial referendum. Obviously, if we're looking at something like statehood, and the other thing that I've heard floated is territorial status, which might be a bit easier to do. We would need some sort of offer from the United States, and it would essentially go to a referendum here. Referendum rules are pretty tricky. You would have a pretty small amount of time to get the signatures. Currently, there's a similar process ongoing with the Alberta pension plan, which is essentially, to put it a vote to the people of Alberta as to whether we should have our own provincial pension plan or whether we should continue putting our money into the Canadian pension plan. With a lot of people who, there's been a sovereignty movement in Alberta for as long as Alberta has been around. There's been so much discontentment because so much of our federal government's focus is on the east, places like Ontario and Quebec. The greatest issue that you'll hear Alberta's complain about is what we call equalization payments, which is essentially redistribution of wealth, which obviously is a big thing in a socialist country like Canada. But essentially what we see is, Alberta having our amazing oil reserves is one of the wealthiest provinces in the country. And so year after year, we pay into federal taxes, and the federal government redistributes that money to all the provinces. And so Alberta annually, estimates from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation says that we pay about $3 billion a year into these federal taxes that are redistributed to other provinces. And Alberta hasn't gotten an equalization payment in 6 decades. So our money is being taken from us. And at the same time, we have a federal government that just hates Alberta's oil industry. Quebec has referred to Alberta's energy industry as dirty oil. And the Trudeau government wants to essentially implement an emissions cap on greenhouse gas emissions, much of which comes from Alberta's energy. And that would simply amount to a capacity reduction because, these suppliers, they don't have the technology to meet this cap, and so they would simply have to produce less energy. So it's like the federal government hates our industry. The rest of the provinces talk poorly about the rest of our energy industry, and at the same time, they're all prospering from it, and Alberta gets nothing in return. And so that's where a lot of this frustration lies. And so if this were to actually go forward, like we're seeing some of the sovereignty movement being pushed with things like the Alberta pension plan, Alberta wanting to distance itself from Ottawa and from the federal government, that would have to go to a referendum with about 60% of support from the province. Now, there hasn't been any recent polling done on the statehood movement. I've actually been talking to a couple of pollsters, and they've seen some of the interest in this, and I think we'll probably see some come out. But I think before it were to go to a referendum, there would have to be a big campaign period of simply educating Albertans on what the benefits of this would be. And if it was a partnership with America, I think one of the big benefits that they could argue would be the economic benefits, as well as obviously more freedom. But I think the economic benefit would really be the thing to push for and to argue here and to explain that to Albertans. And another thing is, there's a lot of Canadians who also would love to become American citizens. As you know, it's very difficult to become an American citizen. And so what I suspect...
Legally, illegally. It was very easy. Maybe not so much anymore.
Too bad the shared border that we share is so frozen all the time. Otherwise, I could just walk across like you have your Mexicans doing. But I suspect we would see a big push for a lot of Canadians who live elsewhere in the country who want American citizenship to move to Alberta, and that would actually benefit this referendum because we would need so many people to say yes for this to actually happen. But it would simply have to go to a referendum, and at that point, there's not much the federal government could do to stop us. I suspect we would see a lot of dirty tricks played during the campaign, as so often happens in politics. But the process itself is not too complicated.
Why have there not been equalization payments to Alberta? And is Alberta the only area that's been snubbed in this way?
Alberta's not the only area that's been snubbed. I'm trying to remember what the other provinces is, but the issue is essentially that because Alberta is so wealthy because of our energy industry, that we're not as poor as other provinces who don't have means for generating revenue for themselves in the same way that Alberta does. So when the federal government puts together this formula, they say, Alberta has their oil reserves and they're producing decent revenue for themselves because we sell so much of our energy to the United States. We actually sell more energy to you than anywhere else. And that's partly because we're landlocked and partly because the rest of the country has said no to Alberta building pipelines across, the other provinces to get their product to the ocean so that it can be shipped elsewhere in the world. There's been many attempts to build pipelines to the east and to the west, and those have simply been rejected, whether by the federal government or by other provinces. And so we're pretty reliant on the United States, and we're reliant on that relationship, which is why, these tariffs are a pretty big deal for Alberta and for the rest of Canada right now. And that's partly because of, Canada's small thinking. Of course, we should be looking to get our products to international markets outside of the United States. We're totally reliant on you guys as a trading partner, and I think that hasn't been to Canada's benefit.
And do you think those pipelines were not created, for environmental reasons, or just because, we had such a good deal between the U.S. and Canada for energy?
Largely due to environmental reasons, as well as if, for example, they were going to be building a pipeline across BC to ship product to Asia, and then there would be tankers off the coast of BC. That was rejected for environmental reasons, like the pipeline, like the fact that there would be tankers on the coast of BC, but also because the federal government has a duty to do consultation with Indigenous groups. And at the time, the Indigenous groups said the federal government didn't do an adequate job of consultation. While this was still ongoing, there was the 2015 election, which saw the Conservative government, then former Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper, his government failed and Justin Trudeau was elected. And as you know, Justin Trudeau has been very hard on Canadian energy. He's been really focused on his environmental agenda. And so that product essentially died. And there was another proposition for a pipeline that would go from Alberta to the east, and it would get Alberta energy to New Brunswick, to refineries out there. But Quebec was simply not interested in having a pipeline across its province because, they have a difficult relationship with Alberta. They're very environmentalist in that area as well. And they said that there was no benefit to them. And so Alberta's had a really difficult time getting its product to other markets. And that's another area why a lot of people who are looking at this are saying this relationship with the United States would be so advantageous because we could get a pipeline down to Washington, the state of Washington, of course, and we could get it off the coast and ship it to a host of, countries from there.
Interesting. Why do you think the Canadian government hates Alberta, and when did this start?
Because Alberta is such a conservative province, and because with the Liberal government that we see now, they have very little representation in Alberta. In the last federal election, there was 2 Liberals, I believe, elected to the House of Commons, to Canada's Parliament, and every other seat went to the Conservatives. That's pretty standard. Even the fact that we saw 2 Liberals win is actually more than we might have seen in the past. And of course, that was in cities where people tend to be a little bit more left-leaning. And so there's just no real representation for the Liberals in Alberta, and Alberta is such a conservative place that's so at odds with the rest of Canada. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I moved here, is that there's actually, a real conservatism here that you just don't find other places. For example, I just spent, the first bit of the show explaining to you how my adulthood and my reporting has really been shaped by Canada's COVID-19 pandemic policies. The government that introduced those policies has been reelected again and again since introducing. They have not faced any consequences for locking Canadians down for essentially 2 years and stomping all over our rights and freedoms. In contrast, in Alberta, the premier that was then former Conservative, if you want to even say that, Conservative Premier Jason Kenney, who implemented a host of restrictions on Albertans, freedom and liberties, he was removed from office. Albertans were like, we are not having this. We do not accept this. You are not going to lock us at home. You are not going to lock down our churches. You are not going to implement a vaccine passport. And they organized and they got rid of him pretty quickly. And Danielle Smith was elected. And during the whole time COVID was ongoing, she was a radio host who was speaking about, how what was happening was wrong and how people were being locked down. And so she was very anti-COVID restrictions. And it was essentially the freedom movement in Alberta that organized to get her elected.
Cool. So it's safe to say Alberta is probably the most conservative place in Canada.
Alberta is absolutely the most conservative place in Canada. I think that a lot of Americans actually somehow know that, because when I posted this first clip with Jeffrey Rath, a lot of the comments were people really liking the idea. And obviously there's a big benefit to America there, because Donald Trump is looking for energy security, and he would absolutely get that with Alberta. And, to your point earlier, you were saying it's difficult to know what Donald Trump wants and what he means by things. And I would totally agree when he makes these jokes about the 51st state, about Justin Trudeau being the governor. You kind of wonder, what is his end game here? And I would be surprised if he actually wanted Canada to become a part of the United States, because Canada is so liberal and so left-leaning, and because we've had so much mass immigration under Justin Trudeau, just millions of unvetted people coming into this country. And I just can't imagine that Donald Trump actually wants, to have all these people join the United States, a lot of really liberal-leaning voters, and then as well, all this mass immigration problem. You guys have your own issues with mass immigration he's trying to clean up. Why does he want all of Canada's problems too? You don't really see those problems in Alberta as much. We're less than 5 million people here. So in terms of the 5 million people applying for citizenship, it would actually be doable. And, our immigration numbers are a lot lower here. A lot of the people who are moving to Canada are moving to Ontario, into the greater Toronto region that we call the GTA. That place has been totally transformed by mass immigration, and even the area that I grew up in, it's almost unrecognizable in some senses. But my sense from what I posted was that a lot of Americans were like, we welcome you, Alberta. And so I think it has a reputation of being a conservative place, even internationally.
Yes, I think this video here helps to give some color to your point. This is from September 2023. In 1 year, Alberta added over 100,000 new residents. Over 60% of them were from other countries. Okay, let me see if this is a longer video, but I think this explains it somewhat.
According to Statistics Canada, Alberta was home to 4.7 million people as of July 1st. That's 184,000 people higher than the same time last year, and much higher than the previous record of just over 106,000 set back in 2013.
We had record population growth. So we saw over 184,000 people added to the province in just 1 year.
Wow.
That's very significant.
International migration is the biggest driver of this boom, making up 61% of the total increase.
Damn.
Hassan Manwari moved here 2 weeks ago due to the Taliban takeover in his home country of Afghanistan.
Deport him!
Like many people, he chose Alberta due to its stronger job growth and relatively affordable housing.
We heard Canada is the land of opportunity for everyone, and comparing to other provinces and cities of Canada, it's better to be here. And
all right, he can stay. He's kind of cute.
It's a little bit cheap.
They look at Toronto and it's really daunting, huge city, too big, and they look at Vancouver, they think, oh, it's so expensive.
People in other parts of Canada are choosing Alberta as well. Migration from other provinces make up 31% of the increase. The vast majority come from Ontario and BC. This influx of people is affecting housing demand, but it's also adding to the labor force, which is growing at its fastest annual pace since 2007, according to ATB Financial.
We still have elevated job vacancies in this province.
Do you guys have a big illegal immigration problem like we do in the US, or are they mostly coming in legally?
It's not nearly as big as yours because our government just allows everyone in anyways. Like, it's the easiest thing to come here, and you'll essentially get put up in a hotel and given government benefits, and then you can apply for citizenship or
Same
for
as here.
PR status. Yeah, it's really bad.
Yeah, New York is. I think we're still doing that, spending billions on the illegals instead of our own taxpayers. It's infuriating.
I've been going through the comments as the video was playing. I feel like you have a pretty good sized Canadian audience that has tuned into this episode.
Guys, where my Canadians at? Let's go to some of the comments. Let's see here. Some of them have been. Oh, thank you, Slosher, for the yellow boy. Part of the reason Canada is in a tough spot with the tariff situation is our government's making infrastructure pipelines for getting our resources to market has been blocked by the Fed for decades.
He's exactly right.
Environmental bullshit I feel like we have to deal with too. Half Irish environmental, and despite Albertans. Saskatchewan, I keep forgetting this is a real place. Saskatchewan gets treated fairly poorly too.
It's funny because this was how we were taught to remember where it was on the the map of Canada schools. This is kind of like Saskatchewan, like a sneeze, and it's also shaped like a Kleenex box.
Oh, Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. 11 Canadian federal MPs were shown to be foreign agents. Chinese. That's the main unstated reason Trump is putting pressure on us. Ooh, is that true?
Yeah, there's been a lot of mixed information coming out about this. So essentially there was this report that was tabled that said that there was 11 MPs who were working with foreign governments to get elected and that they were aware of this. And then there was another whole report done on this. And essentially the commissioner came out and said, oh, there's no foreign agents. So once again, Canadians were really not painted a full picture of what happened here. Those 11 MPs, their names were kept secret. So we really don't know what happened there. I think that this commissioner just came out and said, nothing to see here. As so often happens in federal politics, especially where there's so little transparency.
Jeez, wow, there's so much similarity. Half Irish, how about a renegotiation with Ottawa instead of separating? I'd be good with that. Do you think
Yeah,
that's
so that's sort
possible?
of moving towards like the sovereignty movement that a lot of people want, where they just want more Alberta sovereignty. They want a better deal with Ottawa. We've seen, a lot of efforts to push for that. There was something called the Alberta, I believe it was the Alberta Fair Deal report that was tabled in March 2020 after it was commissioned by the Conservative government at the time. And it gave a bunch of recommendations for how Alberta could get a better deal from Ottawa. Things like the Alberta pension plan, pulling our money out of the Canadian pension plan. Things like having our own provincial police force. Right now, the Alberta contracts the RCMP, which is essentially the federal policing agency. So we would have our own police agency instead. And then one of the things that was recommended as well is essentially doing a referendum on separation. And a lot of people say this wouldn't necessarily be used actually to separate, but to be used as a bargaining chip with Ottawa to say, look how many people in Alberta want to separate. This is actually, a tool that we have in our toolcase that we could use if you guys aren't nice to us and if you guys aren't fair to us. And then, of course, on the other side of the coin, you have people like Jeff Rath who are like, no, let's have a referendum to separate, and we're going to separate.
Wow. Half Irish, Trudeau loathes Alberta. I guess that
I
would
have
make
like a
sense.
personal theory that now that he's not prime minister, he'll never come here ever again in his life.
Whoa. Yeah, he sucks. Slasher says that was a stated reason. The real reason is they didn't want Alberta to become a bigger economic powerhouse and become more powerful. All that
I mean,
oil
the
money.
issue here is just that Alberta has like such a small population with less than 5 million people. And even as we were just listening to in that video, like the population here has boomed in recent years, but it's still like significantly less than other parts of the country, like vote rich Ontario and Quebec, which is what the federal government, they kind of always like try to appease those areas because they need those votes to be elected. I mean, the Liberals, like they were elected 3 times with winning hardly any seats in Alberta to illustrate that point. Like they don't really need Alberta. And then on the other side of the coin, you have the Conservatives who know they'll win basically every seat in Alberta anyway. So they don't really have to do anything to appease Albertans because they're going to win here anyways. So we're kind of getting a rough end of the stick on both sides. And Danielle Smith, a current premier, one of the things she said is, I would like more people to move here. And then we have a bigger bargaining chip with our federal government. The thing is, Albertans that I know and that I talk to actually like the fact that it's, not very busy and it's not too populated once you're outside of the cities like, Edmonton and Calgary. And they don't really want a lot of people moving here and living here. They don't like things being busy. And so when Danielle Smith talks about population growth in Alberta, her base absolutely hates it. They do not want that. They want to keep Alberta small and they want to keep it essentially how it is.
That's kind of how Texans are. They'll just be like, "Oh no, it sucks here. It's really racist. Don't move here if you're from California or Arizona or anywhere else." But so many people.
Yeah, there's something called the Alberta is Calling campaign, which essentially advertises to workers in other parts of the country like Ontario. They'll post like billboards and ads on the subway and things. They'll try to draw tradesmen in specific trades that they need to come move to Alberta, and they'll be offered like a decent tax credit as an incentivization to move here. And Danielle Smith's base, they're always like, they need to end this program. We don't need anyone else moving here. It's like quite comical actually how much they're just like, we don't need anyone else coming here.
Wow, Alberta is calling. Yes, skilled trades, truck drivers. Oh, this looks beautiful. Crane
The
operator.
website or Alberta?
Both.
That's a clean website.
I've never been to Canada. I think I've been to Niagara Falls, but that's it.
We should do like a house swap so you can come to Alberta and you can stay in my house and I can go to your house because I've actually never been to New York, which is pretty crazy because growing up in Ontario really wasn't that far. And I would love to go mostly just for the food.
Oh yeah, we have good food here. Affordable, friendly, and rich in opportunity. Alberta is the answer to building a future. Let's sign up now. What kind of job could I get in Alberta? I am not skilled or a tradesperson, so I don't know. Maybe I can operate like.
I think I've been speaking too fast. So I've been getting a number of comments about.
No, it's just that everyone else is too slow, Rachel. Don't adjust for these people, these morons in the chat. No, I'm kidding. They're great people. 330 days, Canada's sunniest city. Calgary tops the sunniest places in Canada.
I'm going to warn you right now that you're probably not going to be prepared for like how cold the winters are, with the exception if you live in Calgary, because they get like Chinooks when like the warm air comes in off the mountains, and during the winter it can warm up quite a bit, and the snow can even melt and you can have some nice positive days. But the winters here are definitely brutal. Ontario girl myself. I like Southern Ontario. We have like some of the mildest winters in the country. It's been a bit of an adjustment.
I kind of like that though. It's not for the weak. Like
No.
what are your winters? What are they like? 8 months long out of the year?
Well, they usually start like they can start as like early as I would say mid-October, and they can go like the first year I lived here, I want to say, or the second year I lived here, I want to say that we had snow till like April.
Okay, so it's a little
But
worse. than New
in
York.
contrast, like was warm already in February. Most of the snow melted, and it's been in the positives. So
Wow,
I think this is the first spring, and then I think we'll have another snow and another freezing, and it'll be
your
cold for a bit again.
your winter gear probably has to be on point. Like, is everybody walking around in Canada Goose jackets? Everyone has like
That's no. Albertans
quality
don't
boots.
expend money on stuff like that. Everyone gets their
Really?
gear from like Costco, and yeah, people don't
Okay.
really spend money on stuff like that here. I think my winter boots are from Canadian Tire. I just wear them with wool socks. But yeah, you need like a good pair of snow pants to go outside with the kids, and like a good jacket. It doesn't have to be Canada Goose. But that's the
Okay.
other thing, like I think Albertans are just so adjusted to it. Like when my babysitters come over, they'll be in like a little thin sweater, and they like won't even have a jacket on. They'll have like Crocs on or like slippers. And I'm like, it's -15 outside. And it just doesn't bother them.
Wow. So people are more just like adapted to the cold.
Yeah, I think so.
That's so fast.
And a
I'm
lot of
really
people really love it.
I'm really romanticizing Canada. I'm just picturing everybody in like, yeah, bougie, like basically like one like ski chalet kind of everybody with their earmuffs and is
You
everybody
definitely get that too. You definitely get that too, especially in like the Banff and Jasper. You know, if you come, I'll recommend those places to you. I can recommend all the good spots to you. But I mean, not everywhere is like the Rockies either. Like where I currently live, central Alberta, the closest mountains are 2 hours from us. And you know, you're kind of just at the base of the mountains. So you could definitely get that though if you come visit, and you can always, you know, choose where you'd want to live in the province.
Ooh. When we do our house exchange, Rachel, are there do you do a lot of skiing and snowboarding? Is it like a big
I actually don't. I went skiing for the first time this year, and I injured myself a little bit. I have an existing knee injury that I exacerbated. I don't know. I don't think skiing is for people with knee injuries. I did a bit of cross country skiing, and I liked that better. So I think I'm going to pick that up. Might
okay.
leave downhill skiing to the pros.
Skiing is a great sport if you want to get a knee injury, for sure.
Yes,
if
or
you're like,
worse than the ones that you already have.
yeah, like I'm done being healthy. Yeah, I would like a knee injury. Oh, Frank, my loving husband. Trade offer: USA gets Alberta and Saskatchewan. Canada gets Maine, Massachusetts, Oregon, Washington, California. Deal. That sounds pretty good to me. All those states can suck it.
Yeah, but then you can't holiday in California. As horrible as the politics are, it is a
That's
really
true.
beautiful place.
That's true. Yeah, especially along the coastline and like what's it called? Orange County's kind of like a Republican oasis.
Yeah,
in
there's some great
California.
places.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, rad chick. Alberta was the only place in the world that truthfully reported the fallout caused birth defects, and it was not thalidomide. Oh. Reported that fallout caused. Okay. I wonder what that. Maybe that was something else that I missed. But
I was hoping you were going to break that one down for me. Maybe we have to ask Rock about that one.
I know the thalidomide was something that pregnant women was taking to help combat morning sickness, and it like jacked up a ton of babies. I think I don't know if it gave them tails or something, or made their heads smaller. It was very bad for the babies.
That's horrifying.
Let me Google this. I might regret it. Thalidomide babies birth defects. Ugh. Okay. Oh yeah, it sort of turned their feet into hands. That's not good. Or maybe they had no arms or hands at all, or turned their hands until it basically like claws. That's not good.
I have never heard of this. This is absolutely horrifying.
This is from old people generation. Thalidomide is a drug introduced in 1953 as a tranq, later marketed for morning sickness. Resulted in severe birth defects in thousands of children in the late 50s and early 60s. Considered one of the biggest anthropogenic medical disasters ever. More than 10,000 children were born with a range of severe deformities, including phocomelia, a condition where the limbs are underdeveloped or missing. That sucks.
Judging by the comment section right now, I guess that these children were dubbed flipper babies because I've seen
Yes,
that
the
coming up a
flipper
bunch.
babies. Oh, yeah. I mean, now if this happened now, you can get some pretty like boss prosthetics, but 50s and 60s definitely not. I mean, it's probably never a good time to not have arms, but I would say now is
Facts.
probably the best time for a prosthetic. The poor baby.
I'll just keep my arms and legs. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Whoa. All right. Let me see. Let me pull this this up too. This is related. So let me get this straight. You guys have a new prime minister. What's his name?
Mark Carney.
Mark Carney. But then the premiers is that kind of like your governors?
Exactly. They just
Okay.
have like less authority than governors in the states typically would. One of the big things was, Danielle Smith, a lot of people wanted her to pardon people that were charged for, so you remember there was the Freedom Convoy going on, and at the
Mhm.
same time, there was a bunch of protesters who were blocking Canada-US land borders so that trade essentially couldn't be done. So there
Oh,
was
right.
a bunch of men who were charged for that in Alberta and what was known as the Coots border blockade, the Coots being the name of the border down there. And a lot of people wanted Danielle Smith to get involved and essentially pardon these men. And when Tucker Carlson was here last year, he did 2 events in Alberta, one in Calgary, one in Edmonton. He asked her and he was like, why can't you pardon these men? But she doesn't have the power to do that as a Canadian premier, as you would see like Donald Trump have the power. He has the power. And, Joe Biden, he pardoned all these people on his way to office for like everything they'd ever done in their life.
His whole family preemptively. Oh yeah, that's not suspect at all. Fauci, all his degenerate buds. Yeah. Okay, Carney sucks. What's your thoughts on Mark Carney?
I would tend to agree with that. I was saying to my husband today, I was like, I feel like I don't know very much about him other than that he was the former governor for the Bank of Canada. And, I think no one really knows a ton about him except that he's basically just a carbon copy of Justin Trudeau. Like when Justin Trudeau announced his resignation, it didn't seem to be a very fair Liberal leadership contest. The people that worked to get Justin Trudeau were the same people that worked to get Mark Carney elected. And so I suspect we'll really just see more of the same. And, and what Canada needs to really save itself is radical transformation. We're definitely not going to get that with Mark Carney. I think, it's also unfortunate because since we've seen, I think a lot of Canadians thought that when Justin Trudeau resigned, we'd feel a sense of relief. But because he's essentially just been replaced by Mark Carney, I don't sense that relief is there. And now what we're also seeing is that the Liberals, who were polling 20 points behind the Conservative Party late last year, that margin is narrowing. Like there's actually going to be a race. I still think it's the Conservatives to lose. I know a lot of Conservatives in the country who don't feel that way. They feel there's a very good chance that Mark Carney will be able to form government when we have another federal election. And I honestly believe Canada won't be able to come back from that.
Yeah, the chat seems to think he's like Trudeau, but richer. And that Trudeau slithered his way out of his position. He will toe the party line for sure. Interesting.
To give you a bit of information, essentially 400,000 people registered to vote in the Liberal leadership contest, and then we were told that only 160,000 people were eligible to vote. So what happened to the other 240,000? They were just disqualified, and in the end, only 150 people voted for Mark Carney in the Liberal leadership contest. He's now the Prime Minister of Canada. It's insane.
Okay, so he was installed basically.
Yeah, and that's less than half of the people that voted in the Conservative leadership contest that saw Pierre Poilievre elected.
Very suspect.
No.
Rhinoceros says, do we have a date set for the new 51st governor yet? I don't think so, but that would be nice. Then me and Rachel can have sleepovers and Cat Canada and Frankie McDonald. Do you know Frankie McDonald?
I don't, but I know Cat Canada.
He's Frankie McDonald is a viral weatherman. He lives in Sydney, Nova Scotia, which I think is like the boondocks of Canada. It's like all the way to the right side, like basically on top of Maine. And he's just viral, and he'll sometimes appear on my various shows, and he gives me mostly updates about the Popeyes that's being built in his neighborhood, and it's been taking forever to be built, by the way. I don't know who to complain to, but I feel like it's my responsibility because he keeps sending me pictures, and I'm like, Frankie, they barely have a wall up, but I don't, he's passionate about it. So he also has like a lot of videos where he's like, it's me eating 50 hot dogs, and it's like they're fake hot dogs, but you have to be like, oh, that's impressive. He's still putting in the effort. Frankie is a doll. We love Frankie. So we said Frankie the link. Yeah, sure. If he's around, I don't know if he's available. 556. Canada can supply hockey players in maple syrup. Resistance is futile.
We definitely have that in no end of supply. Your chat is popping off. You've got a really dedicated audience here.
They're amazingly, and they're very well behaved tonight. So very proud of you guys. Let's see. Let's see if this is related. Oh, someone in a turban. Great. Jazz meets Jag meet. What a horrible name. Jag meet.
Yeah, Jag meet saying he's the leader of the NDP, which is one of the opposition parties in Canada's parliament. And actually, he's been essentially the individual responsible for keeping the Liberals in power for so long, because his party had what's called a supply confidence agreement with the Trudeau Liberals. So he, in return for, movement on NDP priorities, which never happened. Like, the NDP didn't get anything out of this agreement, let's be honest. The NDP agreed to keep the Liberals in power so that the other parties couldn't hold a vote of non-confidence, which would have triggered an election. And so everyone, there's like this debate in Canadian politics, like, do you hate Jagmeet Singh more or Justin Trudeau? Because we would have gotten rid of Justin Trudeau a long time ago if it wasn't for this man right here.
Wow. Jagmeet sounds like an insult that you would give to like maybe somebody in the military, or maybe I'm confusing it. Like, how they call soldiers like jarheads, or maybe I'm thinking Jagmeet. It just sounds like a slur of some kind. Okay.
It's actually, it's pronounced Jugmeat, which is strange too.
That's even worse.
Yeah.
Jug. Are you hungry? What do you want for dinner? Oh, I'll just have some of that leftover jug meat. No. Singh wants Trump uninvited from G7 June summit in Canada. Oh, what's he gonna say? Let's see.
Given that we are the host of the G7 summit, and given that Donald Trump has
gotta say, his face and head don't match his voice. I was not expecting this voice to come out of that person.
Our very sovereignty, threatened our economic security, we should not invite Donald Trump to the G7. It doesn't make any sense to do so. As a host, we should work with other countries to develop a strategy on how we can resist the very dangerous ideas that Donald Trump's putting forward. And that should be the focus of the summit.
Wow, we're really zooming in.
Yeah, that was a really weird shot. So just for the record, like, no one takes him seriously. Like, he has no sway in Canadian politics. I suspect his party will be reduced to nothingness in the next federal election. He's really irrelevant. He says a lot of really, really stupid things. So no one is really listening to him. And actually, the next G7 is going to be held in, I believe it's June, in Kananaskis, which is here in Alberta, in my neck of the woods. So unfortunately, the federal government never allows any of non-state media to attend any of their press conferences. Like, they have literally called the police on me when I tried to attend a press conference with Justin Trudeau in Calgary. Yeah. And have booted out. So I was like, maybe I can, go through the American administration and try to get accredited through them for access into the media availabilities that they have at the G7.
Yeah, because I guess in Washington now, Trump's letting like podcasters in into the newsroom during press conferences, which is pretty cool. And this Jagmeet guy, he reminds me of kind of like our politicians and mainstream journalists who were like, oh, don't listen to Trump. Like, don't even, we don't have to give him the time of day. He's so dangerous. Yet, like, he's somebody who likes to gatekeep. Like, oh, I'll tell you what Trump has to say, or I'll tell you what his ideas are. It's too dangerous to let him speak for himself. It sounds like stuff we've all heard before.
Moody Bot says
we
impressive
absolutely need
beard,
to keep
though.
doors open.
Oh, sorry.
Moody Bot says impressive beard, though. I mean, he's got a decent beard. It could be trimmed a little.
It is a decent beard. Yeah, it looks a little bit like he maybe works at, it's like a bit of a carnival mustache plus plus some kind of multicolored beard. It's a very cool beard. Yes.
To communicate. We're going to communicate with our allies in the States. There are folks that are really upset at what Donald Trump's doing that we can continue to communicate with. But honestly, genuinely, can we invite someone who has directly threatened our sovereignty, our very existence as a country, who has constantly
Come
said that
on.
he wants to make us the 51st state?
That's not
Can we
threatening.
genuinely have that person around the table talking about how we want to build a better world together? Can we
I think
genuinely have
threatened.
someone who has such disdain for multilateralism around a table talking about how we build up multilateralism? When we are the host and it is us that is setting up this meeting, I believe very strongly that we should not invite Donald Trump to the G7. We cannot, given the circumstances. If we were attending another G7 summit where another country's a host, different matter, we would attend. But if we are the host, we cannot invite someone who has attacked our very sovereignty.
He doesn't obviously understand what the G7 is, and this idea that you wouldn't invite like the leader of the free world, like the economic powerhouse of the free world, just shows his idiocy. Someone in the chat asked me to talk about the pension thing. So this was like a big scandal. I explained how he was propping up the Liberal government when Canadians were demanding an election. Mind you, the Liberals were trailing the federal Conservatives by like 20 points for well over a year. And so it was fairly obvious to everyone that they had lost the confidence of the Canadian people. Those numbers are, like, as I said, evening out a little bit now that we've seen a change in leadership. But essentially the criticism was that the reason Jagmeet was holding on for so long was because he wanted to be eligible for his pension. So I just pulled up a National Post article. So, and this, as of 2 weeks ago, he was eligible for his pension that will allow him in retirement to collect an allowance of about $60,000 per year. Assuming that he lives to 90 years old, it works out to a lifetime pension payout of about $2.3 million.
Whoa. Wow. They're just like our politicians who end up having an amazing net worth. Jeez.
Yeah, miraculously, you're like, oh, you were only making 120 while you were in office. Now you've come out, you're like a multimillionaire. How'd that happen?
Wow. I have a poll going on. Let me see if I can bring it up. Shoot. I don't know if I can. It's on my YouTube. Should Canada join the US? Right now, 43%, 45% just says just Alberta is winning. 17%, all of it. 18%, none of it. And then 20% says only Rachel can come.
I'll take it.
That's a great poll.
The way things are going for us, like, we're going to have to get out of here in a few years anyways.
Oh my gosh. So he only needs to serve 5 years to make a lifetime pension. Wow, it's a pretty good deal. Jeez. Okay.
It really pleases me as a Canadian citizen to know that I work every day so I can pay for people like him to claim $60,000 in retirement after doing basically nothing as a federal politician. Actually, saying he's did nothing is pretty generous. He's done a lot of damage.
He's brushed his beard and styled his mustache, and who knows how many.
And push for
turbans.
The basic human. What's that? The thing, the basic human income, where everyone should just get income for.
Oh yeah, communism. Yes, we love that. Oh, okay. Let's delve into your migrant problem. More than a dozen migrants caught trying to illegally cross into Canada in below freezing temperatures. I gotta give them credit though. If you're an illegal and you're like, let me go through Canada, I do give you credit.
It's a bold move. They've caught people who've frozen to death trying to cross this path. It's no joke.
It's
also,
no joke.
I pulled up these stats earlier, but obviously one of the issues that we're seeing with the tariff war is Trump saying like Canada needs to secure its border, and Canada being like, we're not the problem. Mexico's a way worse problem for us. Well, you guys might have more people coming in through your US-Mexico border, but you have more extreme terrorists crossing into the States than you do from Mexico. Of watch list encounters, so people who are on the terrorist watch list encounters, 87% of watch list encounters at official land crossings came from Canada. So we're just letting all these crazy terrorists into our country, and then they're trying to get into the United States from Canada.
Jeez, that's so scary. Wow. But if you say anything, well, you're xenophobic or you're racist, etc. More than a dozen ill-prepared migrants. Oh no, this is what I feel horrible about, including
Like, look at
5
the
children.
kids. Like, why would you do that to your kids? It's so evil.
Sad. They don't even have their coats zipped up. Caught trying to illegally cross into Canada below freezing weather that could have. That's what a horrible time. Yeah, let's do it in March. In insane winter. Alberta police intercepted 4 adults, 5 children from Venezuela. Venezuela, they don't know about cold. Come on. They're trudging through suitcases through.
I'm
the
just gonna say,
snow.
like, I
Wow.
can't imagine anything worse than pulling a suitcase through the snow.
No, get it good, but put it all in a backpack, whatever you can fit in one of those big backpacks, and that's it. Just be like, oh, I'm just backpacking through Canada. They're having a live, laugh, love moment. Let's see. Alberta police intercepted, with their suitcases in the snow, unless they got snow tires on the suitcases, but I doubt it. Canadian Police Assistant Commissioner Lisa Moreland told reporters the group was found struggling in the snow, incredibly cold. This is so sad. I feel the worst for the kids. Why put the kids through this? Probably because they feel like they'll get sympathy if they bring their kids.
Well, that's basically what happened with you guys. We got the children in cages.
Yep. Oh my God, that looks cold. Brutal. Second group of migrants made up of 6 adults from Jordan, Sudan, Chad, Mauritius, all places that can't handle cold, was located in the dense forest near Manitoba's border. Officials are able to locate the group in the frigid weather thanks to the thermal cameras. Wow.
I have to believe that these people wanted to get caught because they were so cold.
Yeah, they're probably just like,
you would want to. You would be like, please, I will sit in your warm jail cell.
Yeah, true. Just give me a hot chocolate. I'm done with this. Moreland said that in both cases, the migrants were wearing clothes ill-suited to the deadly cold temperatures in the region, as she called the migrants to avoid making such dangerous treks. Wow. There's the cross-border piece, but also the humanity piece. Moreland said of Royal Canadian Mounted Police work surveilling the border. There have been incidents where people didn't make it. People might have succumbed to a heartbreaking situation similar to the freezing death of the Patel family, referencing the infamous 2022 case with an Indian family. Parent and their 11-year-old daughter froze to death. Oh, that's so sad. Why would you do that? Because they just don't understand what cold is. The latest crossings also came as a Canadian was extradited to New York on human smuggling charges over the death of a 33-year-old pregnant woman. Oh, why? Why would you do this pregnant? Oh, I know why. So you can give birth and your kid can be an Insta citizen. Canada has
not worth it.
I could not, especially third trimester. That's no joke. I didn't want to do shit in my third trimester. I was bumping into things. I couldn't get through doors. You're gonna have me try to cross a border? Hell no. Really stupid. Canada has upped its border security as part of a deal with Trump, who claimed that its northern neighbor was bringing in vast amounts of migrants and fentanyl. Border crossings into rather than from Canada have skyrocketed in post-pandemic era, with 23,700 people apprehended in the last fiscal year, just up from 2,200 in 2022. Despite that increase, it stands at a fraction of the estimated 1.5 million apprehensions at the southern border. Whoa. To appease Trump and halt the high tariffs he's threatened, Canada's government promised to commit $900 million, to strengthen the border, including to purchase 2 Black Hawk helicopters and drones. The Alberta border would see a new sheriff patrol unit with 50 armed sheriff, surveillance drones to fly in the freezing winter, and dogs that can sniff drugs. I hope none of those dogs get addicted. I hope they're not coke sniffing dogs.
Probably more for all of it, but I would assume fentanyl.
Oh, fentanyl, of course, yeah. There's no cocaine problem. We love cocaine. No, I'm kidding. Cocaine's bad. Don't do it, kids. Interesting. Wow. I feel like I learned so much. And I care more about Canada than I did before this.
Well, that's so nice. I'm so glad.
It sounds terrible. I know that sounds really...
I'm just softening the rest of the world. I feel like, people have a bad image of Canada over the last number of years.
It is because we see Justin Trudeau and we see all these fags and we're just like, oh God, are they all like this? But
you see our government sending out, troopers on horses to stomp the Canadian people into the ground for protesting for their freedoms outside of Parliament Hill. And you just think, I want nothing to do with that place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the trucker rally really sullied me on Canada, but I'm coming back around.
Well, how the
How
government responded to the trucker rally, because the trucker
Yes.
rally itself was like
Oh,
epic.
right. It was the response. No, I watched every day. I watched Viva Fry's coverage of the rally. That was very, very cool. And then they started to like debank all those guys, and they really screwed them over.
One funny thing, like I know we just talked about how the Liberal leadership race was very illegitimate, but Chryssie Freeland, who was the finance minister who was in charge and responsible for freezing the bank accounts, she also ran for the, to be the next prime minister of Canada, to be the next Liberal Party leader. And she actually only received 8% of the vote after being finance minister and being deputy prime minister of Canada for like a number of years. So even though I feel like the vote was illegitimate, I got a pretty good laugh out of the fact that she was like so embarrassed, and that all of her colleagues endorsed Mark Carney instead of endorsing her. I don't know. I that was like the one highlight of even if it was illegitimate, like that was the one highlight for me. Is like, that's super embarrassing.
That's so pathetic. Yeah, just so she knows just how unpopular she truly is.
Yeah, 8% after your years in the Canadian. I think she was in the cabinet the entire time. So she was in cabinet for like 9 years. Trudeau's right-hand man, and all of her caucus members are like, "See ya, you suck."
That's very satisfying. Wow. Okay. I want everybody to go right now and subscribe to Rachel's YouTube. Let me find it so I can.
I should have actually looked right before we went on this, but I feel like the following has jumped up. It's still a little sad, but I mean, I've been doing this for like 5 minutes, so we'll get there.
Let's beef up these numbers, guys. Go to Rachel's YouTube right now, right this moment, at Real Rachel Parker. Subscribe to her. You've been listening to her this whole hour. She's smart. She's a smart cookie. She knows her stuff. She's very cute. There's many reasons to subscribe. And do subscribe to her on Twitter. Let me have this scrolling below. At Emmanuel_Rach. Is Emmanuel your
maiden name?
Oh, that makes sense.
I actually didn't think I was going to change it professionally, but it turns out there's, I think, a reporter in the States who had the same name as me. And so I would research, and like her stuff would come up, and then people started messaging me thinking that I was the reporter for stuff she'd written. And I was like, you know what? Also, like Rachel Emmanuel, like it sounds great, but it doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. And so
Parker
it was like
better.
It's just shorter, punchier, especially when you're doing video content. So, but yeah, now it's like I've got the stupid Twitter handle, but you really can't change that without losing all. I don't know. I've heard it's a mess. You can change it, but then you're like not tagged in any of the old posts or something. I don't know. It seems like a mess. I'm just going to leave it. Some people keep saying Rachel for Simpcast. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. That's my Sunday night show. It's like a panel show. We talk about like news and culture. I've had Cat Canada on a bunch.
Okay. Do you have like a whole bunch of panelists?
Yeah, it's just a mixture. It's a different group every time. But yeah, if you're free, it's on a Sunday sometime around 9 p.m. Eastern. We'd love to have you on that.
It works really well for me because I'm on mountain time. So it's only 7 for me. So it's like I can put my son to bed and then roll on in. So it works well because I'm like in bed at 9. I'm exhausted.
Every time someone says mountain time, I think it's like I just picture somebody putting on a winter hat. Like it's mountain time.
Yes, a toque.
How cool. A question from my other producer. How much do Canadians pay in tax as a % of their yearly earnings? Can you separate it by entire country and each province and city? I don't know if she knows all that.
Okay, that's a bit much, but I can tell you that it's about 50%.
Not what?
Yeah, that would be like at the highest rate. But it's like between 40 and 50%. It's a lot. And if you factor in the federal carbon tax, which increases the cost of goods and services in Canada, I would argue that it's like well over 50%. So it is a ton of money. I'm going to ask, and it's high actually in Alberta right now. We had higher income tax here than we did when we lived in Ontario, but the government has just announced that they are going to be like lowering that. So the savings about $1,500 for a family. But let me ask Rock.
Wow. That's so crazy. 50%.
The nice thing about Alberta is that we don't have a provincial sales tax. So when you buy something at the store, you pay federal tax, which is 5%, versus when I lived on Ontario, you had your federal tax and your provincial tax. So on all the goods that you buy, it's an additional 13%. And that really adds up.
Gabriel, I think, is a Canadian. Easily 50%. I left because F that. Whoa.
It's high. Yeah.
Tim Hortons. Okay, I will step in. Tim Hortons is not terrible. It's fantastic. We had a Tim Hortons where I used to live in White Plains by the train station.
Okay, but how long ago was that?
Like 4 years ago.
So Tim Hortons got bought out by the company that like owned it, and it's bought by an American company. I want to say like Burger King or something. And they used to, and I was, as a kid, we went on a field trip to Tim Hortons, and I remember we got to go in the kitchen. They made their donuts fresh, and we all got to like dip a donut in the chocolate sauce or like in the vanilla sauce and add sprinkles.
Wow.
All of their stuff is frozen now and shipped out, and they just like heat it up. So it's like the qualities. Plus they get their orders wrong. Like you'll get your order wrong. Someone did like a test. This was so funny. And they posted it. They went to like 20 or like 50 Tim Hortons. And I think during like non-rush hours, a quarter of them got his order wrong. And during rush hours, almost 50% of the Tim Hortons got his order wrong.
Do you think they're doing it on purpose so people talk about it?
No, I think that they hire people that don't speak English and don't understand what you're ordering.
Oh my God. Too many Pajeets. Tim Hortons has been taken over by the immigrants. Oh, how terrible. Well, maybe it'll come back.
Yeah, old school Timmy's was way better. I don't even go there. I won't even get coffee there anymore.
How sad.
I know, it was a great Canadian institution, but like the way most of things in Canada has gone, ruined.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Terrible. Everyone subscribe to Rachel right now on YouTube. Follow her on Twitter. Hopefully we will get her on Simcast sometime soon. Rachel, you're just a delight. So bright, so smart, so informed on all things Canada. Thank you for sharing some time with us tonight and explaining the whole Alberta statehood situation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm especially looking forward to either doing our house swap or just coming to visit you in New York and going and getting some yummy food. I like watch all the reels of like the New York baking and stuff. Also, this interview really worked out because I had a Newsmax hit a few days ago, and I think I spent 2 hours preparing for it because I really struggle to remember like facts off the top of my head. So I was like, I gotta refresh myself. Ended up being 10 seconds. They asked me one question.
That is how that goes all the time. And Newsmax, sometimes their studios, they have them in New York City. I will go in like 40 minutes early, and they'll spend all this time fixing my hair and makeup, which I love. But then I'll be on a show for like 3 to 5 minutes. And it's just sometimes the hits are so quick. They're very unpredictable. Sometimes they'll cut segments, but yeah, it paid off. You really know your shit. And I'm the same way. I have a terrible memory.
A woman having like women thing, or maybe woman having kids thing.
It is. What happened to my brain? The baby took it all and he sucked it all out of me.
I used to be a writer, and that was like a very good fit because I could like research my facts before I had to say them. But now I'm like, I gotta know them.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that breastfeeding takes like, I don't know, 80% of your brain.
Okay, well, I just finished. I breastfed my son for like 18 months. I just finished, so that's where that went.
Yes, good for you. We're on month 11 right now. Were you like, I'll leave it up to him, or did you like consciously wean off?
We were gonna go for 2 years. He like really like was his thing. He liked it a lot, but my body just eventually said no when I started to have all these weird symptoms, and I was like, okay.
And you know what? People might poo-poo that, like, oh, it's too old. But actually, human babies are literally designed to breastfeed for 2 years. It's just most people don't really do it, and that's incredible that you went as long as you did. A lot of women, like, they'll go a couple weeks, they'll maybe go a couple months.
Well, it was kind of great though, because it's like whenever they're upset, you're like, I just have something on hand that I can whip out. I didn't even need to pack anything.
Right. It's always warm. You don't have to heat up a bottle. You can take it anywhere. And it's good for like teething, sleepy, cranky, hungry. Like it just cures many ailments. So it's like a hug.
Exactly.
See?
It's the best.
It is the best. Oh, that's so sweet. I'll have to send you a picture of My little guy. He's 11 months today. I can't believe it. It flew by.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Oh my gosh, it's the best. It's the best thing I ever did. He's so cute. Everyone follow Rachel. I hope in this time you have subscribed to her YouTube and followed her on Twitter.
And there will be more content. Like I said, I've been doing this independent thing for a week. So if you're like, oh, there's not really anything here, that's why
she's
we're
just
working on
getting
it.
started. You want to get in now so that in a year or two you can be like, Rachel, I heard you on Chrissy's podcast. I've been with you since day one. You know.
Yes, that you can be like, I was there from the beginning. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like doing this whole new business thing around my son's nap schedule. So, you know,
that's you gotta do it. Yeah, that's what
I mean. You're recording at 9, so you totally get it. It's almost probably 10 now, actually.
Yeah, I wait till he goes to bed, and then usually he's hungry again at midnight. Yeah, I'll probably go pump now and then sit around and wait for him to get hungry. Good times, guys. Thank you, Rachel. You're the best. Thank you, chat, for your comments and questions. And we will see you all next time. Bye.